So I'd like to tell you the story about members of my union, the Australian Services Union, and their battle to save Sydney Water. The ASU is the union for all workers at Sydney Water, indoor and outdoor. They are good public sector jobs, jobs they have fought for and won in great conditions and pay over decades. But their jobs were under threat. We had the election of a Conservative government in New South Wales in 2011. And that government went on to privatise so many assets and services. And we knew that public water was at risk. So our members prepared to campaign to save Sydney Water. There were several steps they had to do in that campaign. The first thing was making sure that the opposition party, the Labor Party, supported saving Sydney Water and keeping it in public hands. And that we were able to do through lobbying and meeting with that party, who itself had had different views on privatisation in the past. The second thing we had to do was build support in the community. We commissioned research from a leading think tank that talked about the cost of privatisation on communities and households. That research showed that water bills would increase for every house by over $260 Australian a year if water was privatised. So our campaign was ready and we were approaching a state election. Now we knew we had to make this a major issue in the election because water was one of the only things the government had not privatised. And if they were re-elected, it was on the cards. So there was a key moment then in the campaign where during the election period, the Conservative Premier of our state was asked, "Will you rule out privatising water?" And he said no, he would not. He refused to rule out privatising our precious water supply. Well, this was both a risk and an opportunity for us as a union. It was a risk because it demonstrated that the threat was real, that privatisation was on the cards. But it was an opportunity because I think most of the community didn't really see that risk. And the fact that the Premier of the state, during an election campaign, weeks until the vote, refused to rule that out, well, we weren't going to let him do that and people not know about it. So from that, we took that as an opportunity and mobilised our campaign with billboards on the street, signs in people's gardens, social media posts, leaflets at train stations, that the threat was real. And that the community had to support us, the workers at Sydney Water, to save Sydney Water together by changing the government, by voting them out, and by voting in a government that would not just protect Sydney Water from privatisation, but protect it in our state's constitution. Well, we got a lot of momentum and support. So much so that the Labor Party decided that it would commit to actually protecting public water in our state constitution if they were elected. And so what happened? Well, the election came around, and thanks to the great campaigning of our members and members of the whole mighty trade union movement in Sydney, the government was kicked out and a new Labor government was elected. And that Labor government upheld its commitment to protect Sydney Water in the Constitution. It was the very first act of Parliament, of the new Labor Parliament, to actually save Sydney Water in the Constitution. And we had workers there in the Parliament gallery with the Premier as he introduced that legislation. So this was a great campaign and a great victory. But was it just a symbolic victory? Because what we also know about Sydney Water is that the Conservative government appointed anti-union management to that organisation. That management team then sought their revenge on the workers for having saved the company from privatisation. We went straight into a bargaining period where the company then tried to slash wages and conditions. But our members stood united again. They said no, we organised, we took industrial action, they went on strike, and then we won that battle too, and won wage increases this year of over 8% alone, and a cost of living bonus, and didn't go back in one single condition. So I think the story from this is that we need to organise, we need to be unified, we need to take our message out to the community. But also, we don't just need to keep services in public hands, they need to be run also in the public interest. And public companies should not be run like private anti-union companies. So our struggle continues until we change the management team at Sydney Water, but it's still worth noting and celebrating, and for hope for others around the world as to what union organising, union campaigning and union solidarity can achieve when we all work together.